Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have a friend of the show, because he's been on here before, and that is Jerry McGovern. Jerry is an author and developer of the Top Tasks method, and also a fellow Celt. So Jerry, on that note, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Adrian.
So Jerry, if for people that aren't familiar kind of with you or our previous interview, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the work that you do?
Yeah, what I do, I suppose, is research, trying to understand what people need, what really matters to them, and then trying to create models of design that prioritize those top tasks. So most of my career over about 25 years of working in the web has been focused on trying to really understand in a specific area what's important. And I developed this research method called Top Tasks, which prioritizes what really matters, but it also identifies the stuff that doesn't matter to people, what I call the tiny tasks. And that's a research method that's been used quite broadly over the last 10 or 15 years, maybe 500, 600, 700 times in governments in places like Cisco and Microsoft and Toyota, and often larger organizations, because it tends to deal with more complex environments where there's a lot of competing interests and people are not sure, well, what are the real priorities here within the environment. Okay. So that's the core of what I've done. I do a lot of talking and speeches and presentations and workshops over the years as well. But the essence is this method called Top Tasks, which is a research method to identify what really matters to people.
Awesome. Now, I remember talking to you about the Top Tasks methodology, because you actually took the methodology and you put it in a book, like a how-to manual, so people could pick it up and run it themselves. But you've also been busy at work on another new book, which has just come out, but this time it feels like quite a departure for you, and because it's called Worldwide Waste: How Digital is Killing Our Planet and What We Can Do About It. So, I mean, I love the title, but Jerry, can you tell me about it and how it came about and who's it for and kind of what's its main kind of thesis?
It's in some ways it's not that disconnected with the Top Tasks concept. One of the things I noticed as I worked with organizations was that a huge quantity of the stuff they did was wasteful or unnecessary, or we go in and work on intranets and try and figure out what the employees needed, and find all these huge quantities of databases of junk, of useless stuff, of either bad data or bad systems. Sometimes you go in and you'd find in a larger organization that had 4 or 5 or 6 training systems. Right. And employees wouldn't know often which one to go to for various type of trainings that they might be looking for. So I began to wonder, why is this okay that we, create so much junk? And then it struck me as well, a couple of years ago that, digital is energy, because I became inspired, as I'm sure many were, by young people and Greta Thunberg and all the millions of other young people coming out about the environment, and that we were really doing a lot of damage to the environment. And I was sitting from my side thinking, isn't it great I'm working in digital? Digital is green, and if we could only get more people using digital, wouldn't that be better for the environment? That was the smug kind of position I had. And then one day, I don't know, either I read something or something, and this thing just hit me. I said, well, digital is electrical, everything in digital consumes energy. And that just began a journey of trying to understand it. And then I began to discover things like the quantity of e-waste that's created every year, like something like 50 million tons, which is the same as the weight of all commercial aircraft ever built, and would cover Manhattan. Every year there's as much e-waste created as would cover an area the size of Manhattan, and that practically none of it gets recycled, and that in fact it's deliberately designed not to be recycled. It's
so
not
can you explain what you mean by that when you say that e-waste? I mean, kind of just give us an idea what you mean.
Well, old phones, old screens,
right.
old computers, all the the old servers, old computery stuff. Or electronic-y stuff, or even we saw there with the EU saying you need to go to a common cable for your smartphone. And then somebody talked about the tons and tons just of cabling waste that occurs every year. So we create enormous quantities, and it's getting, the estimates are that by 2050, if it keeps going, there'll be 120 million ton created every year. So in the background, we're creating these vast quantities of waste. And then data-wise, we've come into zettabyte territory, and zettabytes of data are almost unimaginable. Like I calculated, I did roughly calculation, how many books could you get from a tree if there was 300 or 400 pages in a book, etc. I calculate how many books, so I think it was somewhere between 20 and 30 you'd get from a typical tree. And then I calculated how many, if a zettabyte was printed out, how many trees would that be? And it would be like 20 trillion trees to print out one zettabyte of data. Now there's 3 trillion trees on the planet at the moment, which is a lot of trees, but I mean, one zettabyte, and we're by in another 10 years, it's estimated we'll have over 2,000 zettabytes of data, and it's just ramping up at such a pace. We have created more data in the last 2 years than in all of previous history. So between 2017 and 2019, we created more data than between 2016 and the emergence of humans.
Yeah. I mean, so the interesting thing is that it's not just about devices, but it's also about that, I guess, the behaviors that we have, and the things that we do, and therefore the requirements we place on the devices. I guess there's two different kind of like cycles spinning.
There's two sides, because the devices partly are there to store the data or manage the data or manipulate the data, so they kind of go hand in hand in their consumption. As we make bigger hard disks, we find reasons to fill those hard disks with more data. And what I discovered is that a huge quantity of this data is literally crap. It has no function, no useful function, no and to give you an example of what I mean by absolute total, crap data is I have a folder that I've kept all the top task surveys that we've done, and there's been over 500 of them done over the years, and there was about 14 gigabyte in that folder, and I decided to go into that folder to see why is there 14 gigabyte, and I discovered things like in the early years, because of some design decision, we were saving a CSV file and a CSV folder and an Excel folder file structure of the data that was sucked down, because we suck down data and then we process it.
Yeah.
And then I found all sorts of other formats and changes, and then I found copies of copies and copies and this and that. And when I stripped away everything that was totally unnecessary, right, that added absolutely no value.
Yes.
Just all sorts of junky this, junky that. I went from 14 megabytes to 1.4 megabytes. 14 gigabytes to 1.4 gigabytes.
Right.
So all of this stuff was just sitting there, and people say, oh yeah, but you never know, you might. No, there's loads of stuff that is there's just junk. Like I'm editing a video or a piece of audio at the moment, and it's all chopped up into loads so the editor has all these 30 or 40 or 50 files. Now at the end of the process, I'm going to save one WAV. So I'm going to have a WAV file that consolidates all of those files. So it's going to be a single file. But I'll still have in my folder those 60 or 70 little bits. And unless I do something, they'll stay there, and they'll be there in 20 and 30 years. And when you multiply that by all the activity that's occurring, so this crap is not, oh, this might be interesting at some stage. No, it's not. Leave that, let's not even touch that sort of stuff. It's just the 16th copy of that, or the fourth draft version of that you didn't get rid of in the process. And so that brought me to where we're extraordinarily wasteful as a design and digital community.
And you kind of there's a quote in the book that I wanted to links to that. You said up to 90% of digital data is not used. Like, what sort of society accepts 90% waste? Now, I wanted to understand also about when you say digital data. Now, is that just kind of like the data that we hold in sort of like databases and stuff, or do you actually kind of think you actually can also talking about data that is like web pages and documents and everything else?
It's everything, because everything ultimately ends up as data, being stored as data. So it's your photos that you've taken. It's the web pages. It's the code. It's the HTML. It's the CSS. It's the JavaScript. It's everything. It's like the world is made up of atoms. The digital world is made up of data. So when I say data, I mean everything. Yeah. From the videos to the songs to it all ends up as data. It's all stored as data.
Yes. I mean, I thought they kind of, because I kind of went through the book and I was a bit like, wow, this is really, I mean, it's kind of alarming, but also very cool, because it's like having another door open to it. Like, oh, see that room that's full of junk? Yeah, that's just, everybody's got a room like that sort of thing. And it just kind of like, it's almost like a dimension on systemic thinking in many ways. You just added a digital dimension.
If you had a house, Adrian, if you had a digital house, right? Mm-hmm. And it had 16 rooms, 15 of them would be full of junk.
Oh, crumbs.
You'd live in one room, and the other 15 would be full of junk.
You can imagine that. If you can picture that, ladies and gentlemen, imagine it's like it's almost like a small car pulling a massive trailer behind you all of the time.
Yeah, and that's why we have such massive data centers, and so much we are storing junk.
Yeah,
and we don't care because it's cheap, because it's because we don't notice it. It's and we don't clean up afterwards. In fact, most systems, as I've noticed, like iTunes. You
Yeah.
can't delete a song. Like we were talking about punk, and I
Yeah.
used to be a music journalist.
Right.
You know, I love music, and you know, you buy stuff over the years, you know, and you think, oh, I shouldn't have bought that. I really hate that now, you know, or you know, I don't like that music. With Apple says, sorry, that's going to be on your account forever.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can only hide. More like I was looking at working with a guy in other editing software, their podcasting editing software, and we set up a couple of test files just to test out this system, and we tried to delete the test files and said, oh, you can only delete the name of the actual file has now gone to Dropbox, so you can't delete. You have to go over to Dropbox and find that and delete it. So, but so many systems are designed not to delete things.
Yeah. I think the other thing you kind of, I wanted to also ask you about another thing that's in the book, the where you kind of, because this gives us an like a view on how extensive this, you know, the thinking needs to be when it comes to this sort of stuff. Is, you said in the book, the biggest productivity improvement of all I have been associated with was when we convinced the organization to cut the crap. When we did a massive cull of 80% of the crap data that was on the intranet, a whole world of productivity blossomed. And I was like going, yeah, no, that I can, anybody who works for a large corporate and has to use an intranet will probably kind of have a sense of affinity with that story, because trying to find stuff on most intranets is kind of really hard. So I just wondered if you could tell me that story.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's 100 or 1,000 stories connected with that. Like, you know, we did, you know, I done work for many intranets over the years, Tetra Pak and IKEA and the BBC and loads and loads of environments, and practically in every one that we succeeded with, the success was founded not on buying new systems or anything like that, but actually just deleting and training people not to create, and reducing the team from 600 part-time contributors to, you know, 10 reasonably full-time people, you know, and
Yeah.
scaling back the junk creation, and making things, you know, focusing more on quality metadata and just doing less but doing it better. You know, this myth that, you know, we buy this technology system and then it will magically solve our information organizational challenges, you know, is just the perfect lie that senior management buy into year in, year out, because essentially they don't care. They don't want to deal with what is still a difficult human problem of organizing information.
Yeah. I mean, but also kind of the other thing that the book goes into is also kind of say, also says, well, actually, there is it's not just about devices and data that exists in the digital realm. There's also there's like a softer side to this. There's like an organizational structure angle to this, and you use you say this is you use an organization called I think I'm getting the pronunciation of this right, Buurtzorg, that exemplifies this. I mean, can you tell us a bit about them and kind of how the organizational angle and them and what they're doing kind of fits into this?
Well, I think a lot of organizations have become producers of information rather than producers of value.
Right.
And deliverers of services. So I think particularly you find in hierarchical organizations that you get layers of management whose job is to create information to prove that they have a role and a value to the organization. So you either get meetings or processes or reports or activities or you know, ways of behaving that are more focused on the legitimization and the continuation of some management role than the delivery of value. And traditional healthcare was a very good example of that. I mean, traditional healthcare in the US has been a disaster in the last 50 years. I mean, the quality has hardly improved. but the costs have skyrocketed because
Yeah.
you have vastly more administrators being hired than doctors or nurses
Yes.
in factors of hundreds in that area. And what they do is, in many cases, they make the lives of the doctors and nurses miserable
Mm.
by analyzing their every step. Like in home care, traditional nurses were, they were monitored everything about their job. If they were tying a shoelace, that was supposed to take 35 seconds, and they were supposed to report back on it, and so you get all these elaborate systems demanding more information and more time of the worker in order to feed the monstrous dashboard of the middle management and the higher management, so that they can watch numbers rise and fall and rise and fall. And Buurtzorg came around 2008, and it started off as just 4 nurses, and said, we're going to do something totally different. We're not going to create all that management crap junk information. We're not going to measure based on these traditional metrics of outputs. We're going to measure based on outcomes of our patients, and they figured that the most important metric for the patient was to live an independent life, because they were home help. They were mainly on people keep in the community, and people wanted to stay in the community. They wanted to stay their own homes. They wanted to live independently. So they set that as the absolute focus, and they essentially got rid of all their management. They never had any management to begin with, but there was only 4 of them. But they said, we're not hiring any managers. So they built up these independent 10 to 14 person teams. Of course, they were constantly sharing information and collaborating, etc. And they said, you're not going to be measured anymore. There's no metrics in terms of how long it takes you to tie shoelaces, how long your visit is taking, how many visits you made. The only core metrics is that person able to live independently? And some other metrics they brought in, which were very positive, were that you need to spend about 60% of your time at least with your patients, not on filling stuff out. So they turned the whole model upside down from a traditional point of view. And today they're at about 14,000 nurses, and around the globe they're seeking to copy this model, because it's a model that's focused not on the production of useless management information, but rather on the delivery of genuine services that help people live independently in their homes.
No, absolutely. I think it's I think it's an important point, but it's just about how, as you say, if you can slim away the kind of the control aspect of these kind of organizational structures, then you reduce a lot of that, as you say, the data and the waste. And then you allow people if you allow people just to focus on doing what they need to do, then that creates kind of value, then and focus on the right sort of outcomes and minimize the control and the measurement thereof, then in the case of Buurtzorg, then you're not going to go far wrong.
Absolutely.
So the other thing I wanted to kind of I wanted to kind of talk to you, and there's another couple of things that occurred to me when I was reading the book, because I was reading it and I was thinking about it and going, I've always had a bit of a sort of an itch, if you will, an uncomfortable itch when it comes to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, based on kind of how they work in terms of almost like a syndicated sort of mining sort of network that gets associated with all these different things, and I just thought, while the technology and the application of them is interesting, I did wonder about whether they were sustainable, because it feels like it takes a lot of effort to keep things going. But I mean, are they sustainable?
Well, not in their current structures, and I agree with you. The blockchain, and I think they're fascinating ideas and with tremendous positive potential. But like so much else in technology, they are they are designed from a waste mindset, and
Yes.
that they're designed from, you know, unlimited energy
Yes.
ideas, and you know, because the whole core of the strength of uh, blockchain seems to me that is that, you know, its strength is its application of maximum energy to create an unbreakable, you know, code. That
Yeah. Yeah.
the code strength is based on the maximum consumption of energy.
Sure.
So I think the philosophy, the sheer lack of concern that exists within the general technical industry
Hmm.
uh, to energy and to conservation and to reuse and to, you know, basically not abusing stuff as if, you know, there is no cost to this and there is no consequence to this, and I can have, and I hold my hands up as being part of that until
Mm.
very recently. You know, I always bought the biggest screen I could buy. You know, I have my laptop because I travel a lot, but I come home and I stick it into a docking station, and I had the laptop on, screen on, and you know, a big 28-inch, I don't know what size screen that I sat in front, and I never saw any consequence for having the two screens going, even though I don't need the two screens by
Right.
any means. And right now, I'm talking to you just from my laptop. I've stopped using the large screen, and I said, you know, why? You know, because it's only a little, but it's all these littles
Yes.
that add up, and oh, the data centers are use a lot of renewable energy, and you know, that's bullshit. You know, because they've got a million computers that were made. You
Yeah.
know, each one of them, you know, they cost energy. Most of the pollution is caused in the creation of the digital products.
Right. Yeah.
70-80% of the pollution is caused by the manufacture of the hard disk, by the, you know, by the creation of the actual server. So we've got this huge hidden pollution going on in the background, and then they're saying, oh, look at us, we're so green. We're so green after building a data center that's like 110 football fields big. You
Yes.
know, how can they get away with this BS?
So kind of like, let's kind of like, you know, if we've taken a pot shot at Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain and stuff, yes, whilst they're interesting and useful looking, they have some unintended consequences, or some kind of like some ignorances associated with them, that we need to kind of like throw the spotlight on the environmental consequences of all these technologies. So, but just to complete the set, what about cloud, in inverted commas, and AI? I mean, that's just all in the same bracket, right?
Yeah, cloud. You know, it's not in the cloud. It's like these gigantically enormous uh, areas of land, like as I said, 110 football fields big, of, you know, of areas taken over by these things, and because we don't see, and we partly say, oh, but our phones are so, you know, energy efficient, and yes, phones are, except in their manufacture, of course,
Mm-hmm.
where most of the energy and waste is created. But one of the reasons that phones are so efficient is because the data center is the workhorse
Yes.
for the device. So there's still lots of processing and energy being consumed happening. It's just that, you know, the phone is the dumb terminal
Yes.
for a lot of this sort of activity in the process. So these data centers have a huge demand, and even the renewable ones, you know, these windmills and things, they need to be built. You
Yes.
don't build them from magic. You know, they need to be built, they need to be transported, and the electrical grid will continue to creak a lot out of date. There's a type of gas that comes off the electrical grid. I think it's called SF6 or something, and it's thousands of times more damaging than CO2 in the process. So the electrical grid is a huge source of global warming sources as well. So it's not it's not a production challenge we have, it's a consumption challenge. We
Right. And so you're not advocating that we shut everything down.
totally no, but that if we you know think more about what we do. So I love my smartphone, but let's hold on to the smartphone for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. It's a perfect storm.
Yeah.
If you've got a product where most of the pollution is in its production, and then you give that product a very short life cycle, that is a perfect storm of pollution.
Yes.
Because most of the damage is already done, right? So therefore you should use that thing for as long as possible to repay that damage that you've already done to the environment. But if you're getting rid of that after 2 years, that's a perfect storm of environmental damage that with a short life cycle. And because many other traditional products, a car or stuff like that, most of its pollution comes through its use. You know, so it's not, of course it's damaging and stuff like that, but cars tend to last 10 or 20 years in the environment. So the production pollution is not as great. But with digital products, because they're so difficult to manufacture, they're very, very energy intensive in their manufacturing. So we need to hold on to them more, but instead they're designed deliberately to become obsolete.
Yeah. So, you know, my blog and podcast is primarily sort of like focused on, you know, how do we improve service and experience, or how do we build organizations that produce better outcomes for both, you know, customers and employees and wider stakeholders. And so I'm thinking about what you're talking about, and thinking about you know, all of this. I mean, because I've been researching and writing about the idea that we need to think more holistically about how people gauge the experience that we deliver or we're offering to them, and that'll include how we treat employees, what we stand for, what we're about, how we go about doing things, etc., etc. What do you think is the impact of some of what you're talking about, some of the things that you've found out on service and experience? What should service and experience kind of leaders be thinking about or asking themselves to try and, if you like, fold or force or inject this into their thinking and their practice?
Well, there's some universal laws, I think, out there that are both technological and human. And in the technological is, the greater the distance, the more the energy.
Right.
So if you're saving a document to your hard disk versus you're saving a document in a typical cloud environment, that can be up to a factor of 3,000 of a difference in energy consumption.
What, more in the cloud than on the hard disk?
Than on the hard disk. So,
right.
So the closer, and another, ironically as well, in strange ways, the more wired, the less energy intensive. The more you send stuff through the mobile network, the higher the energy consumption. So there are certain rules, but distance in general, the greater the distance, the more the energy. So
right.
if you're looking at, you know, from service philosophies or areas, and you look at the old cliche, keeping it local.
Yeah.
Keeping, you know, the less you bring from long distances for the restaurant or the whatever. It's not just a nice idea that the vegetables were grown locally, like that we look at seasonality more in, you know, designing the food that we eat, you know,
right.
in the process. But also another principle is, you know, use your own energy, not digital energy, you know, if given a choice, you know. So anything that involves effort is good, human effort.
Right.
So how people can maybe in some ways participate in the service in some, like that, so rather than, you know, getting that stuff in the plastic, that it gets washed.
Right.
That there's, that as whenever we displace our energy,
Mm-hmm.
we create waste, and
Right.
it's often unsustainable way. Like plastics are just not. We can't deal with plastics. It's just an obscene invention of the human mind. It has uses important, but we created something that cannot be away. Cannot dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
It can never go away. Plastic never goes away. It just keeps breaking up into smaller and smaller particles, which is breathed in the air, which is ingested by fish. So these philosophies of, we got to create systems that where waste is reusable.
Right.
That
Or
people,
not created.
pardon.
Or not created.
Well, we minimize it, yeah. Where possible, we minimize it. But it's okay, you're going through and you're editing that video, but you have to allocate a certain amount of time after to clean up all the little chunks. That that you have to allocate 10 or 15 minutes to the day, or 10 or 15 minutes, to the pro. And how do we get people involved in, green bins, black bins, this bin, whatever, that where people actually, the anti-Alexa, get up off your arse and turn the switch off. Like, like, think of the amount of energy that's consumed, that how far, when you tell Alexa to turn the light off, that bloody well goes to Kansas or Tokyo to a data center, or wherever, and gets processed and then gets sent back. Think of the abuse of the earth that is, when it would be far better for you to get up off your arse and walk over and turn the light off.
Yeah.
You'd be healthier. You'd have got an extra 60 seconds exercise in the day. Digital is making us lazy and obese, and it's bringing out the worst in human behavior in so many ways. And these companies, the Amazons, they want us to be, almost incapacitated, just have enough capacity to pay them with the credit card, and they'll turn us into blobs.
Well, I mean, I think there's a big challenge, Jerry, and I think that, I mean, I agree with you that I think we need to be both incredibly more conscious about what we do and how we do it, but also much more forensic about the consequences of what we do, and the waste that they're doing, the production of things, what it creates, and how we can minimize that, or reuse it, or eliminate it, or whatever. And so I think I really liked the book, and I think it's a real sort of eye opener. So I mean, I congratulate you on that, because I kind of learned an absolute kind of like bucket load of stuff.
Oh, thank you, Adrian. Thank you. And just they're fine. I was thinking, like, I think I discovered, because I was clean. I was my fan was going and constantly going on my computer, and I was recording some audio. So I was getting rid of, closing off programs that normally come up at startup, and then I looked, and I never really noticed it, because it was always there in the background. But I've got a PC, and it was OneDrive, and I said, well, I don't have anything in OneDrive. Would it be? Why is it using energy? Why is it, creating the fan to jump? So I go into the OneDrive folder, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. I don't know how it saved it, but there's a whole bunch of my stuff in OneDrive, and I never remember. But there's 10 gigabytes, 20 gigabytes in there. I didn't even know it was there. It's like, oh, you got a 16-room house with 15 full of crap. No, it's actually a 17-room house. And 18, 20, there's so many rooms in your house you don't even know.
Yeah, these hidden rooms. And
if we had designers, I don't know, could we have an energy monitor that somebody clever, and you download, and it says, hey, do you know this used this amount of energy this week on your laptop? That folder is kind of a bit smelly.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why you got so much stuff in that folder? And that it kind of prods us
Yes.
Oh, it's the weekly cleanup time, or we need designers to really think about that I think you follow the waste. You don't
Yeah.
follow the money.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
absolutely.
if
I
you
mean, so the
follow
thing is, if you, I mean, this, I mean, such a big, big issue, Jerry. I mean, if I was to say to you, I mean, you know what kind of people are like, they kind of, it's almost like, they're really, I'm including myself in this. I find it kind of useful to, somebody says, do this first thing first, take this first step. What would you say that first step would be?
I would say every day, ask yourself this question: what am I going to take away today? What am I going to get rid of today? Yeah, can be small, can be big, but get rid of something every day.
Perfect. So, Jerry, one final thing that I explained to you about, before. It's like at the end of all of these interviews, I've been asking people a couple of questions, and it's based around, it's like an ongoing piece of research just to try and crowdsource some ideas and stuff, and it's related to the book I published last year called Punk CX, and so it's all right. I've got a couple of questions I wanted to ask you, and the first one is, if we were to do a word association game, if I said a punk approach to CX, you would say what?
Anti-authority, or challenge you, or underneath the hood, or DIY, and getting straight to the results. No bullshit.
There you go. I think I've got a whole list of them I'm going to add to my list.
Right.
And so if we flip that and we go, okay, so what company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of ethos, that sort of punk ethos?
I was thinking, and I think the one we mentioned earlier, Buurtzorg,
Yeah.
in a way, 37 Signals, I think, as well. The people who do base camp and things like that, but you really struggle, don't you? Because once you get into the big organizations, they're just bullshit PR. Like it's all lies. Like it's all the bigger organizations seem to have they just become monsters of tax avoidance, and it's very hard to see companies you really admire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. So Jerry, I mean, that's all I have right now. I just wanted to say, congratulations on the book. I hope it gets widely read. I know that, I mean, I'll make sure this goes out and give you a big sort of plug and a shout out sort of thing, because I think it's shining a spotlight on, what economists would call externalities that that are kind of hidden right now, but we need to kind of throw the curtains kind of wide and open on this and these sort of issues, because if we don't, then it's just we're on the kind of road to disaster if we keep going down this route.
It's one thing, to destroy the earth for stuff that's useful, but just to destroy the earth just to create crap.
Yeah.
Like we can still have this life and get rid of 90% or a modern life. It's not about getting rid of the smartphone. It's not about, but it's maybe about holding on to it for another 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's maybe just about cleaning up and not needing 200 gigabits, surviving with 10 gigabits.
Sure.
Gigabytes, and more than happily. And I guarantee you'll be more than happy, because it doesn't make you happy to have 17 rooms full of junk.
No. And on that note, Jerry, just want to say, well done on the book. Congratulations and all that. And thank you for your time, sharing your time and your experience and your insight with us today. That's been great.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to know more, jerrymcgovern.com/www is the page about where and section on the book World Wide Waste.
I'll make sure I get all that linked up in the show notes as well.
Okay.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.